So our victim in this case is Nicholas, or Nikki Kuhnhausen, born July 6th of 2001. Nikki was living with friends in an apartment on Brant Road. We received a report on June 10th of this year by her mother, Lisa Woods, and we were told that Nikki was missing and rarely went more than a day without contacting her mother. Through interviews with roommates and mom, detectives learned that Nikki left her residence on June 5th. She returned early in the morning on June 6th and left again a few hours later with a male she reportedly met earlier that evening or the night before. There were no further contacts or sightings of Nikki since that time. Members of the Missing Person Unit and Digital Evidence Unit obtained social media information on Nikki. They authored warrants for her social media, and using that information, David Bogdanov was identified as a person who picked her up at that residence. In attempting to contact Mr. Bogdanov, a number of family members were contacted, and social media was utilized to try and attempt contact. Detectives were eventually able to contact Mr. Bogdanov. He confirmed in a meeting with him that he had picked Nikki up at the apartment that morning. David and Nikki went to a residence in the county, and at this time, David says Nikki told him that she was biologically male. David gave a statement that made him really, really uncomfortable and disturbed him, and he asked Nikki to get out of his van, and she walked away. According to David, that was the last time she was seen. More investigative information came in, showed a number of inconsistencies with the statement that he made to detectives. And as we worked that case, we caught probably the biggest break when a citizen on December 7th of this year, walking in the Larch Mountain area, came across a human skull. Clark County deputies arrived and confirmed the findings and called out Clark County Search and Rescue. They conducted an extensive search of the area over 2 days and collected a number of items of evidence and human remains. It should be noted that that area is extremely steep, heavily wooded, and a lot of underbrush, and they really did an amazing job of collecting all that evidence for us. Over the next week, analysis was done on those items along with the forensic examination of the remains, and with that information we were able to confirm the remains to be Nikki Kuhnhausen. Based on the location of the remains and the earlier obtained evidence, detectives decided to attempt a second interview with David. We attempted contact with him yesterday, and he declined to give any further statements. At that point, he was arrested for second-degree murder. Of course, our condolences go out to the family and friends of Nikki. If you have any questions, I'm going to bring up my two sergeants. They can respond to those. Are there any questions? Yes.
Will this be classified as a hate crime?
That is going to be determined by the prosecutor's office when they review the full case. We make a decision about the murder 2 charge at the time that there's an arrest made. That can also be altered at the discretion of the prosecuting attorney's office. So that's stuff that I'd defer to Mr. Golick.
In the probable cause statement, the detective says that he believes it is likely that the two had some sort of sexual contact. Is there any evidence to provide, or is that just what you think?
Well, so there's additional work being done right now with the crime lab and some of the evidence that we've recovered, so I don't want to address that right now.
Could you tell us why there was a delay in information coming out from December 7th when a skull and other remains started to be found to now? I mean, there wasn't a press release from your office, I don't think, until the last day or so.
Yeah, it was an active case, and we wanted to work a couple other angles before we brought it out into the open, so we could try and kind of wrap up maybe some other witnesses or talk to the suspect. So it's pretty typical.
Part of that time also was spent trying to positively identify the remains. We certainly don't want, there's more than one missing person case in the county, and we don't want to, give people the, tell them we found remains and we think it's your child or your family member, and then have it not be.
So would you say right now in Clark County there are other active missing trans men or women out there? And could they be
I don't-
related to him?
I don't think trans is necessarily part of the missing person group. It's just there are, if you look at the police reports, there's a lot of missing people. There's missing people from all over the place. And if you go out into rural Skamania County and Clark County, people find skeletal remains. And so you got to try and figure out who it is before you obviously confirm their identity before you notify any family members. So there was a delay in that part of it too.
This is a second-degree murder case. Can you describe why that is based on what you're...
Well, so the difference becomes premeditation. And so until we can flesh that out with the prosecutor's office, again, the detectives put the charge on the piece of paper that they think the probable cause supports at the time. As the investigation continues to unfold, new evidence may be obtained. The prosecutor may review it and think there's a more appropriate charge from their experience and expertise. And so many times you'll see that charge gets changed. Yes?
But is it based on your belief that he became enraged, and so this was in the moment thing as opposed to something where he had any time to think about it, or can you kind of...
Right. That's a very good analysis.
Can you do it for me so I don't...
You don't want to...
Yeah, well, we don't have information to lead us to believe that this was premeditated in the sense of the information we have is leads us to believe that they had a kind of a hookup meeting, and that it wasn't targeting Nikki for a particular reason, that it arose probably from the hookup meeting. And now this is where it gets the legal aspects of more than a moment in time for premeditation and stuff. That's what the prosecutor looks at to make that decision.
Can you talk a little bit about his brother? And I know he was out with the brothers as well that night from your guys' probable cause documents. And I know you talked to both of his brothers. They said they didn't recall that night, those sorts of things. But from David's first interview with you guys, very clearly it was like, oh yeah, I was out with my brothers. We were out all three at the bar together. We were going to each other's houses. What do you make of that? And are you going to be talking or maybe pressing charges with them as well? Because it seems like they were trying to hide something.
You should address that.
So that's obviously part of the investigation that's still ongoing. The conflicting statements certainly raised some concern about who knew what and when they knew it. So that part of the investigation is still ongoing, and I'll leave it at that.
There's still a lot of follow-up to do.
Was there any indication that these two knew each other before any kind of social media communication?
Our records show when we wrote search warrants for the primarily Snapchat social media platform that it appears that they only knew each other, they spoke that morning. From the information from David Bogdanov, they had met the night before. So we found no records to indicate they knew each other prior to that meeting.
Because she was a teenager and he was an adult man, any sexual contact they had with each other, could he also be charged with statutory rape?
Well, in Washington State, the age of consent is 16. So if you engage in consensual sexual activity at 16 age or older, it's not a crime.
However, it can be a crime if it's a prostitution event for anybody under the age of 18, which we don't know the extent of that.
There are certain circumstances.
There are
where
certain
it is.
circumstances for the sexual exploitation of a minor that would certainly apply for anybody under the age of 18, but we have yet to find that component yet, largely because we have a small amount of data from the social media platforms that we've been using for our investigation that primarily centered around the missing person side. If we find information that will support that, then we'll certainly exploit that. But As Sergeant Kipp says, this is, even though it's doesn't seem early on in the investigation, the turn that the discovery of the remains took and then the arrest of David Bogdanov have certainly opened up a wider swath for us, and that takes a lot of work to get those things accomplished. So the answer is yes, it can be, but not specifically just based on age.
Would you be willing to, again, describe why this isn't a hate crime or Washington statute, what the reasoning is for it not now being a hate crime?
Well, it certainly may be, but that, again, I defer back to the prosecutor to make the charging decisions about it. If there's an enhancement, I'm not sure which route that they're going to go, so I defer to them.
You talk about, given the age of the remains, how you go about determining, say, cause of death, time, manner, things like that.
Sorry to keep doing this to you guys, because I would refer you to Dr. Burt from the medical examiner's office. We consult Dr. Burt. There's a forensic anthropologist that I think most medical examiners use that works for the King County Medical Examiner's Office, Dr. Taylor, and the remains were, we sent the remains up there for Dr. Taylor to do an analysis, and between Dr. Taylor and Dr. Burt, they formulate an opinion. And so that's where I would refer that.
I think it would also be important to note, Lieutenant Ryan mentioned, when you get to this remote area of Clark County, it is very rugged. The 2-day search that took place was in an extraordinarily rugged area. If you can imagine humping up and down hills like a hunter, the remains were spread out over several hundred yards in thick underbrush on a very steep embankment. So gathering all of the evidence, if we had a homicide inside of a house, it would be far simpler to determine cause of death. This makes it extraordinarily difficult. It could take weeks or months, or if at all. Their job is certainly difficult all by itself. Then you add that component of animals taking remains in every different direction, add that to decomposition issues, then it could be extraordinarily difficult, if not possible.
Is it the belief that they were spread out on purpose?
No, if you have any experience with animals and remains in the woods, it's very common for animals to take remains, and like any other type of animal, they would feed on it and move it and protect it.
How might her remains have been positive there if it's such steep terrain?
I'm not sure we understand the question.
Like, if it's such a a wild area of the county.
It's just on the side of the road.
About how
It's just on the side of the road is where it probably started. Yeah.
I see.
Not like the side of the road where you're driving by, but like just over the edge of the side of the road.
What would you like the trans community to know about their safety and what the police are doing to ensure their safety?
Well, we'd love the community to know that we take all of these missing person cases seriously. Anytime we have somebody who's within a group that is sometimes targeted because of their personas or their beliefs and lifestyles, then we tend to bump that up on our concern levels because there is so much negative thought process by some. So I mean, we take them all seriously. We don't know at this point that this was a targeted attack based on lifestyle. Certainly we believe it played a part of it in this incident, but